What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So I think it's fair to say that Google's new Pixel devices were the most hyped smartphones of the year this year. Sure, it was partly because of Google's own constant stream of leaks and sneak peeks that perpetually kept it in the news cycle, but I think it was also due to the fact that the Pixel 6 and this Pixel 6 Pro were really the first entirely new smartphones that we've seen in a while. Rather than simply refreshing the previous year's devices like so many companies do, which honestly is getting pretty boring, Google seemingly just started from scratch. And everything from the design to the software experience, the cameras, even the processor powering it was all brand new. That was a pretty big risk, but fortunately, I think it paid off in a big way. And in this video, I'm going to talk about why I think the Pixel 6 Pro in particular is so good. I've thoroughly enjoyed using this phone over the last month. I think it's incredibly capable, it's priced just right, it still has the best camera you can buy. Not everything is perfect though, but overall, Google effectively launched the first smartphone in a while that genuinely piqued my interest. To start off, let me just quickly say that for $899 unlocked, the Pixel 6 Pro is very enticing. While other Pro and Plus and Ultra phones have a four-figure price tag, this phone offers everything and more for a few $100s less. And yes, I do think the Pixel 6 Pro is worthy of its Pro distinction, but more on that later. This phone undercuts the likes of the iPhone 13 Pro by a lot. It beats the retail price of the S21 Ultra and S21 Plus, and even is cheaper than the OnePlus 9 Pro at its launch price. I guess with all that being said, the Pixel 6 Pro might even be the best smartphone deal out there right now for a flagship. And I think that's the first thing that grabs people's attention. The other thing that certainly grabs people's attention, the design. The Pixel 6 Pro really doesn't look like most other smartphones. And I think it's a love it or hate it sort of a thing. Up front, things are pretty standard, but around back, you get almost a retro 1980s sort of vibe. Rather than a trio of cameras in the corner, you get this long black strip of lenses and sensors. That's not just visually very jarring, but also physically prominent. It's essentially a speed bump, but actually I sort of like this because the phone lays mostly flat on a table at just a subtle upright angle. No wobble though, and it makes the phone easy to interact with when it's laying there and also to grab when you're done with it. It's one of the most unique camera setups on any smartphone today, but honestly it's probably the most practical too. I'm sure you also noticed my Pixel 6 Pro is finished in what Google calls sorta sunny. It's a half light yellow, half light tan colorway that I'm not really a fan of. Stormy black or cloudy white would be my preference, but it's unique and interesting and certainly fits the theme and aesthetic of this device. Material-wise, being a premium flagship phone, you can expect a premium flagship build, and that's what you get here. Gorilla Glass Victus rear housing, polished aluminum frame in sort of a copper color that looks really nice, and IP68 water and dust resistance too. Now, I'm sure you've seen more than a few other YouTubers crack their Pixel 6s already. Not sure what's going on there, but mine has held up perfectly fine. And I also like having Google's own case on it. This is their light frost case, kind of clear, kind of matte finish, but for $29, it gets the job done. I really only have two minor gripes with the design and build. First, the Pixel 6 Pro has that curved edge on the glass. The regular Pixel 6 does not, and I would have preferred a flat screen. You get a very subtle bit of distortion along the edge, sometimes an unintended tap with your hand, and overall, curved front displays are just something I don't personally care for anymore. The other small thing I noticed is a wiggly jiggly power button. There just seems to be a little more play than the button setup on like the Pixel 5a, for example, but not a big deal. Overall, the Pixel 6 Pro definitely offers a unique but still very modern design, hole punch camera cutout, solid screen to body ratio, premium materials all around, and a good feel in the hand. I think Google really did a nice job with all the physical traits of this phone. For the out loud listening experience, the dual speaker setup sounds really good too. You've got one down below, one in the earpiece, which is an actual slit. It's not hiding under the glass or anything. And I think this phone delivers crisp, clear, and very loud sound. Here's a sample so you can get an idea. One aspect of the Pixel 6 Pro that has received a ton of criticism, surprisingly, is the in-display fingerprint reader. Now, Google has often had some sort of physical sensor, usually around the back, like on the Pixel 5 and 5a, so the in-display sensor is new for them at least, and compared to what a lot of us are used to, this setup is a little slower and a little more inconsistent. For me, it hasn't been as bad as other people have said, but it takes that extra fraction of a second, a sort of tap and hold and wait, to get into the phone, and it can be finicky sometimes. Now, yes, I've added the same fingerprint twice. I've enabled the increased touch sensitivity in settings. There's no screen protector installed either. It's just a slower fingerprint sensor. And I think the thing that makes it particularly tough to deal with is that there's still no face unlock on this phone, so you don't have any other biometric unlocking option to even choose from. In Google's defense, they say their sensor is at least more secure this way, so take that for what it's worth. But if you're used to an ultra-fast, ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, this is going to be a downgrade. One of the best aspects of the Pixel 6 Pro in particular, I think, has got to be the display. Now, I already mentioned that I could live without the curved edges, but beyond that, this phone offers a fantastic top-of-the-line viewing experience in every way possible. The large 6.71-inch screen is an AMOLED panel at the full 3120 by 1440 resolution, 512 pixels per inch, which is incredibly sharp at this size. And it supports HDR10 Plus content, and it's a 120Hz panel. It has it all and then some, and the viewing experience on the Pixel 6 Pro really is top-notch. You can make some slight adjustments to the display if you want, but the default color profile looks good to me. It's bold and bright from top to bottom, and like I mentioned, very sharp too. Not a lot of smartphones nowadays even offer a resolution this high, but on a phone this big, I think having all of those pixels really makes it worth it. Combine all that with a dynamic 120Hz refresh rate, and you have an incredibly smooth and responsive user experience to go along with that great view. I think the display as a whole is one of the first ways in which the Pixel 6 Pro really earns its Pro distinction, and it's obvious that Google cut no corners here whatsoever. It's certainly one of the most well-rounded displays as far as the specs, and this is absolutely near the top of the rankings overall. The big sort of unanswered question when Google launched its Pixel 6 devices, of course, was how well its new in-house processor would perform. Google, for the first time, put their own chipset inside these phones, their Tensor chip, and while it is based off of the same architecture as Qualcomm, there was still some uncertainty on how it would stack up. Fortunately, I think Google's Tensor chip is fast, fluid, powerful, and it now sets the stage for them to hit the ground running, with perhaps a whole lineup of lower, mid-range, and flagship-tier Google processors for future devices. On paper, the Tensor chip is about as powerful as the Snapdragon 888. In some aspects, the two chipsets take turns as to who comes out ahead, but I do consider the Tensor chip to be flagship caliber, and in my experience, I haven't run into a blip or a hiccup or any other performance issues at all. And that's great. You're paying a pretty penny for this phone after all. And I think after a couple of years of mid-range and outdated chipsets, it was time for Google to bring back a top-tier, high-spec smartphone. And that's exactly what they have here. Throw in 12 gigs of RAM and you pretty much have as powerful of an Android device as you could want. The other factor in the user experience, obviously, is Android 12. And I think if there were something to criticize, this is where I feel as though it's due. Android 12 on the Pixel 6 is less stock, more Google focused, and I think the overall aesthetic and some of the changes, specifically for Android 12, weren't overwhelmingly positive. The notification panel feels crammed at times with tons of blank, wasted space. Same with the quick settings drop-down menu. Connecting to Wi-Fi takes one too many steps now. The menu items are hilariously large. I think visually in Android 12, not every change was necessary, and some things feel more cartoonish, more bulky, and less user-friendly. Still, there's no debating the endless amount of solid pixel-specific Google features offered here. Live transcriptions and real-time translations are incredibly powerful and useful. It's just that while previous iterations of Android have usually felt like an upgrade, Android 12 to me feels like a sidestep with some unhelpful UI changes, more than anything else. Still, the Pixel 6 Pro overall is an incredibly powerful, incredibly capable, and well-spec'd device. that, once again, I think makes it absolutely worthy of its Pro distinction. And it is the flagship caliber smartphone you can have for years to come. It's a solid investment, especially with Google's few years of committed software updates, which is one more Pixel-specific bonus. The other element to the Tensor chip, in particular, I think a lot of us were curious about, was how well optimized it would be with the battery life. Now, there might have been a YouTuber who claimed something like 3 hours of screen on time with the Pixel 6 or something ridiculous. That's not what I've experienced at all. I've been getting 8 to 10 hours of screen on time easily with this phone, day after day, and I think you could push it beyond that. I run my phone at like 80% brightness most of the time. I'm always staring at it, but for me, this has been an all-day phone with no issues, and that's what I've seen most other people experiencing too. You get a 5,000 milliamp battery inside this big phone anyway, so you should expect great battery life. The 30-watt charger can also juice this thing up to 50% in 30 minutes, which is fine, though not overly fast compared to some other devices. And you get 23-watt wireless charging and reverse charging too, the full suite of power options. All in all, battery life for me has been a non-issue, and I'm relieved the Tensor chip seems to be optimized in that regard. Finally, let's talk about that big array of cameras across the back. And this is particularly interesting mainly because Google, for like the first time in years, actually put new camera hardware on this phone. So you now have a 50 megapixel main lens paired up with a 48 megapixel telephoto lens and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. The selfie camera gets an upgrade too. It's now an 11.1 megapixel shooter. Now, I've gone over probably a few hundred pictures from this Pixel 6 Pro already and offered some insight in some other videos, but let me break down all the important stuff and then I'll show you some samples. So the wide angle lens is decent. It's not particularly wide at just 114 degrees or the equivalent of a 0.7 zoom, but still useful and very capable in every shooting condition, especially low light. The telephoto lens is really good. That gets you 4 times optical zoom and 20 times digital zoom. And while it's no S21 Ultra, it beats the iPhone for sure, and it's plenty capable in its own right. Video capabilities are much improved, I'd say, for a Pixel device, though maybe still below the iPhone. Generally still really good though. Stabilization in particular is great. There's also those handful of fun little extras that Google offered, like the long exposure shooting modes, and I have to mention the magic eraser because, well, yes, I know it's no more impressive than a Photoshop tool, it's really useful that it's on the phone, and that not only can you pick and choose whatever object you want to remove from your picture yourself, but you can also see the suggested edits too, which are sometimes really good, and it works really, really well. It's not perfect, but for a quick removal of some random stranger or unsightly object in your picture, it's great to have. Overall, the Pixel 6 Pro excels at capturing the most detail in every shot you take. It offers the sharpest, clearest, most crisp looking pictures of any smartphone camera I've tried, and for complex shots, scenes with a lot of texture, a lot going on, you can really see the difference. Low light and nighttime shots, of course, look great, and this phone can literally see in the dark, but at times I would argue it does go over the top with lightening and brightening the scene. In general though, if I had to shoot any random picture with a given smartphone, the Pixel 6 Pro is going to be my choice 100% of the time. Not only is this phone once again the best picture taker on the market, it's somehow better than the Pixel 5 was, which was also the best of the best. And again, this is another aspect where the Pixel 6 Pro, I think, earns its Pro name. There's no better picture taker on the market, and it really does offer a pro camera experience. So I don't think it's any secret that I really like the Pixel 6 Pro. It's not perfect, but for a completely new phone from top to bottom, Google did an amazing job. The design is interesting, but the specs and features and performance are all flagship caliber, with the dozens of Google-specific extras and add-ons thrown in too. And best of all, the price is just right. The Pixel 6 Pro is certainly the most interesting Android phone I've used this year, and I think it's deserving of some of the hype. And with the Pixel 6 lineup a relative success now, I'm only more excited now to see what Google has for their smartphones in the future. But what do you guys think about the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.